Thank you. This is Chris Carlsen from Lighting Global Quality Assurance. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining. Since we have quite a short period of time to present, I'll be giving you a brief introduction to Lighting Global Quality Assurance, touching on our quality standards for off-grid solar kits and the types of products that are currently supported. I'll then shift over to the concept of international standards harmonization, and most importantly, what this means in the context of the humanitarian aid sector. After that, I'll pass the mic over to Nicole, who will share lessons learned from Lighting Global's experience in protracted displacement situations. Next slide, please. So very briefly, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Lighting Global QA program is part of the broader Lighting Global Market Development Program run by the World Bank. Next slide. Our program can be divided into three main components: test methods and standards, testing and verification, and communicating quality to the market. Next. Of note is that our quality standards have been submitted to the International Electrotechnical Commission, and we're expecting the IEC to adopt those quality standards early next year, which is pretty exciting for us. Next slide, please. Here's a general overview of our quality standards. Again, for those of you who are not familiar, our quality standards are the most widely recognized internationally for these types of products. They cover Pico PV products with solar modules less than 1 watt up to 10 watts, and larger solar home system kits that go all the way up to PV modules with 350 watt peak. Of note, the standards set baseline levels for quality, durability, and truth in advertising, with a key focus on protecting consumers. It's also notable that the standards are non-prescriptive and technology neutral, meaning that they don't set any minimum performance requirements, and they don't require any particular component type. So that allows manufacturers and designers to be innovative when they're designing products that are most suitable for the users. To determine if the products meet our quality standards, they need to be tested according to the IEC test methods from accredited third-party test centers. Next slide, please. Here to give you a taste of the type of products that we're dealing with. I've broken it down into the, please go back, thank you, into the two types of product categories we have, Pico PV and solar home systems. You can see on the smaller end, we're talking about primarily lighting. Oftentimes these products provide mobile phone charging and possibly power other small appliances. In terms of the Sustainable Energy for All multi-tier framework, these smaller Pico PV products can provide up to tier 1 energy access for more than one person and possibly up to a household. Then moving up to the larger range of solar home system kits, you can see that since they have larger batteries and larger PV modules, they can also provide more energy services to the users. So they often include appliances such as fans, TVs, radios, and obviously lighting. So when we move towards the larger end of that spectrum, these products can provide up to tier 2 energy access for households. Next, please. So for those of you on the webinar, I encourage you to go to our Lighting Global website and check out the product database. You can find a wealth of information about all of the products that have been quality verified, and you can also download specifications for all of those products, as well as type approval documents that can be used to verify that a particular product does comply with the standards. Next slide, please. It's also important to understand what's outside of the current scope of our quality assurance program. So as I mentioned before, it's limited to products that are under 350 watts peak, and The systems currently that we support only have DC direct current output. So AC systems or AC appliances are not included. Custom designed component-based solar home systems are also currently outside of the scope, as are standalone and productive use appliances such as TVs, fans, solar water pumps, and the like. I do want to mention here that we are working to develop a quality assurance framework for component-based solar home systems. And my colleagues at CLASP are also exploring the development of a QA framework for standalone and productive use appliances. So on the CLASP side, under the LEIA program, they're seeking feedback from stakeholders to identify needs for those appliances and what types of products they're interested in. So if any organizations on the webinar are interested in using a QA framework for procurement decisions for these types of appliances, please feel free to contact me and I can put you in touch with my colleagues on the LEIA program that are developing that framework. Next slide, please. Here, just to give you a taste of where standards for these products are being adopted and considered. You can see there's a pretty large concentration in Africa and Asia. Next slide, please. And now, as our quality standards are being transitioned to the IEC, we are expecting a pretty short-term expansion of countries and regions that will be aligning their national and regional quality assurance frameworks with ours. So this should give you a pretty good idea of how expansive this is getting to be. Next slide, please. And so talking about standards harmonization, here is to give you a general idea of the importance of why we want to have internationally harmonized standards. Pretty much across the board, consumers and markets, standards agencies and governments, and other stakeholders all benefit in different ways from referencing the same set of quality standards. Next slide, please. Now, specifically honing in on humanitarian aid organizations, there are several ways that you can benefit from using harmonized quality standards for these products. So organizationally, you can increase the confidence in the products that you're procuring, which ultimately reduces the programmatic risk. You can have strengthened tenders, for example, referencing the Lighting Global database of quality verified products, as well as our technical support. You can have increased product selection, transparency, and really facilitate the whole development of the technical requirements and the process of bid evaluation. And more broadly, like I said, we're protecting consumers, we're aligning our approach with governments and other programs, and believe it or not, these procurements that the humanitarian aid organizations are doing do support sustainable market development and encourage product quality and innovation. And my last slide. So what can you do now? I encourage everyone to learn more. So please go check out our Lighting Global website, where we have a wealth of resources, and we can also offer some great guidance from my talented colleagues. Insist on quality. So that's a pretty basic one. If you're looking to procure products, it's a good idea that they meet international standards. Know the regulations in the countries that you're operating. So if you're looking to procure products for use in Kenya, for example, make sure that the products you're getting are aligned with those national standards. Also, understand your beneficiaries. So to make sure that you're getting the best, most appropriate products, we all need to know what the user's energy needs and expectations are. And finally, we all should focus on creating awareness. So this includes people within our own organizations, other organizations that we work with, as well as the users to really reinforce the importance of product quality. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you everyone for joining. So I'll be talking to you about what the private sector looks at whenever entering a new market, specifically in displacement situations, and at the same time tell you more about what we found in Lebanon in 2018. Just to give you a small overview, Lighting Global is a joint IFC World Bank program, has been active in the market for more than 10 years now in the solar off-grid commercial market. And our programmatic approach is based on quality assurance, as Chris said, on business development from the IFC side, and on support to governments from the World Bank side. So here I listed a couple elements of whenever a company is looking into going in a new market, what are the elements that it will look into, and a market assessment is one of them, and that's exactly what we did in Lebanon in 2018. Next slide, please. So on the left, you can see a small summary, a really summarized table of what the private sector would look at whenever entering a new market. And I will use this as a filter and template to tell you more about what we found in Lebanon. So why do we look at the current expenditure and income? Of course, we want to understand what can people currently afford, how much are they spending, and the importance that the population gives to energy. And that is directly reflected in the portion of income that people spend on energy. And here we can see that the Lebanese host communities spend about 10% of their income, Syrian refugees in camps spend 18% of their income, and Syrian refugees in rented accommodations spend 23% of their income. And this is based on a cohort of 740 households that we interviewed. Next slide, please. On the next slide, we're going to look at power supply and energy needs. We look at this because we want to understand what is the most appropriate technology to be deployed. And we found out in Lebanon, not surprisingly, I have to say, if anyone here on the webinar knows something about Lebanon, the grid is highly unreliable. There are load sheddings starting at 3 hours in Beirut and increasing more and more when going further away from the capital. So people use generators as backups. Syrian refugees in camps are outliers in this, in the sense that they are the ones who rely the most on grid and generators separately. And there's a reason for this, because sometimes the camps might be in rural areas, in remote areas, even though Lebanon is pretty small, but those areas might not be reached by the grid, and so they use generators. Or because energy is pretty expensive, even though it's subsidized by the government in Lebanon, but sometimes they're not, generators are too expensive, so they just rely on the grid and go through the power outages. We also looked at the appliances that these people use, and here you can see that the usage of these appliances is pretty high, with pretty high loads such as refrigerators. Next slide, please. We also looked at the supply side, and we interviewed 68 retail shops. Why do we look at the supply side? We do so because we want to understand how easy or hard it would be for a company to potentially find a distributor. And we look at financing options because it is crucial in the moment when a company needs to price the product that they're looking to sell. And here, the results are not surprising. 75% do not sell any solar products, 50% do not provide retail financing, and only 9% would finance refugees. And finally, next slide, please. We make a estimation of the market. And here we estimated a potential demand of 20,000 to 25,000 solar home systems with a potential market of $5 million. Important to say is that we assumed an average of $200 per kit, and we identified as main targets, and that's also an important thing, to identify the main target customers to be Syrian, in this case, to be Syrian refugees in camps and rented accommodations. Next slide, please. And so as a final slide, I just wanted to tell you what we think that these results tell us. So number one, previous living conditions are extremely important because they shape energy use whenever even more than current affordability levels. And we've seen that just by looking at how much these people are spending on energy. They're spending a big chunk of their income. And that has a direct effect on the right technology to be chosen whenever going into a new market. Of course, the technology that is chosen, for example, in MENA is completely different from the technology in sub-Saharan Africa. And so this was a effort, part of a bigger objective to create and to make available more data and information about protracted situations to the sector. But even so, this data is becoming more and more available. These untapped markets are still perceived as too risky by the private sector. And so what do we recommend? We recommend to involve MFIs since the beginning, because these people might not have the right liquidity on hand to pay upfront for these products. But in general, that's not very different from commercial rural settings. So we're used to that. And then pilot interventions are essential. So we need to concentrate on those for the moment to reduce market entry risks for companies. Thank you. And here, one last thing, we have useful resources which you can access by clicking on them, and they're all on our website. Thank you.